A disabled puppy trembled as it begged a cop for help. And then he did the unthinkable. What started as a stormy night on patrol turned into a moment that would change everything. One broken, desperate animal. One officer who was never known for kindness. But when he picked up that tiny life from the street, he uncovered a darkness far worse than anyone imagined. Behind the puppy's injuries hides a secret one that powerful people will do anything to protect. Soon, the officer isn't just fighting for a dog's survival, he's fighting for his own. What was hidden in the shadows? And how far will he go when justice means risking everything? This space is built on something simple and enduring: the power of love, the truth in kindness, and the belief that quiet care can still change lives. The rain drummed against the patrol car's windshield as Officer Clint Harwood guided his vehicle. Through the dark, empty streets of Cedar Grove, lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the wet pavement ahead in brief, harsh bursts. It was the kind of night that usually meant a quiet shift. Most people were safe at home, away from the storm's fury. Clint's weathered hands gripped the steering wheel as he made his routine pass down Mason Street. The digital clock on his dashboard showed 11:15 at night. His face, etched with years of maintaining a professional distance, reflected in brief flashes from the street lights above. The windshield wipers swept back and forth in a steady rhythm, fighting against the heavy downpour. Through the sheets of rain, something caught his eye, a dark shape moving slowly across the road ahead. Clint leaned forward, squinting through the rain-streaked glass. His heart jumped as the shape became clearer, a small animal dragging itself across the wet pavement. Without thinking, Clint's foot slammed on the brake pedal. The patrol car's tires squealed against the wet road as it came to an abrupt stop, barely 5 feet from the creature. "Dear God," Clint muttered, quickly throwing the car into park and grabbing his flashlight. He jumped out into the rain, his uniform immediately getting soaked as he rushed toward the animal. The beam of his flashlight revealed a puppy, small and frail, its fur matted from the rain. The sight made Clint's chest tighten. The puppy's back legs weren't working right, dragging behind as it tried to crawl forward. Its eyes, full of fear and pain, looked up at him. For the first time in years, Clint felt his carefully maintained professional distance crumble. He knelt down, his knees hitting the wet pavement. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the rain. The puppy whimpered, but didn't try to move away as Clint slowly reached out with gentle hands. He scooped up the trembling animal. The puppy was so light, so fragile in his arms. Its body shook with each breath, and Clint could feel its rapid heartbeat against his chest. Without hesitation, he ran back to his patrol car, shielding the small creature from the rain with his body. Once inside, Clint quickly grabbed the old blanket he kept in his back seat for emergencies. He wrapped it carefully around the puppy, trying to warm its cold, wet body. Under the car's interior light, he could see the extent of the puppy's condition better, and what he saw made his stomach turn. The puppy's injuries weren't from an accident. The way its back legs were damaged, the marks on its body, these were deliberate. Someone had hurt this innocent animal on purpose. The realization hit Clint like a physical blow, cracking through years of emotional walls he'd built around himself. "Dispatch, this is Officer Harwood," he said into his radio, his voice tight with an emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. "I need the address for the nearest 24-hour veterinary clinic." The dispatcher's voice crackled back, "With directions to Valley View Animal Hospital, about 10 minutes away." Clint flipped on his lights and sirens, protocol forgotten in the urgency of the moment. The puppy whimpered softly from the passenger seat, and Clint found himself talking to it, something he'd never done before. "Hang on, little buddy, we're getting you help. Just stay with me." The drive to the veterinary clinic seemed to take forever, even though Clint pushed the speed limit. Every whimper from the puppy felt like a knife in his chest. He kept glancing over, watching the small bundle wrapped in the blanket, making sure it was still breathing. When he finally pulled into the clinic's parking lot, Clint didn't even bother to properly park the car. He grabbed the puppy, blanket and all, and rushed through the rain to the clinic's entrance. The fluorescent lights inside were harsh after the darkness of the night, but Clint barely noticed. The night veterinarian, a woman in her mid-30s, with kind eyes and graying hair at her temples, took one look at the puppy in Clint's arms and immediately called for her assistant. "Bring him back here, quickly," she ordered. Leading the way to an examination room, Clint found himself hovering nearby as the vet carefully unwrapped the blanket and began examining the puppy. His uniform was still dripping water onto the floor, but he couldn't bring himself to move away. The vet's face grew increasingly grave as she worked, and Clint felt his heart sink. "Officer," she said finally, looking up at him with serious eyes, "these injuries, they're not accidental. Someone did this deliberately. The damage to his back legs, these burns, this is clear animal abuse." The words hit Clint like a physical blow. In his 15 years on the force, he'd seen plenty of cruel things, had learned to distance himself from them. But something about this small, innocent creature that had been so brutally harmed, broke through all his defenses. "Can you help him?" Clint asked, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't quite hide. The vet nodded slowly. "We can treat his injuries, but he'll need surgery and extensive care. There's no guarantee he'll ever walk normally again, but we can make sure he's not in pain anymore." Clint found himself nodding, his hand unconsciously reaching out to gently touch the puppy's head. The small animal leaned into his touch, despite everything it had been through, still capable of trust. Something inside Clint's chest ached at that simple gesture of faith. "Do whatever you need to do," he heard himself say. "I'll take care of the bills." The vet looked at him with surprise, clearly not expecting this response from the usually stoic officer she'd met before during other animal-related calls. "Are you sure? The treatment won't be cheap, and there's no guarantee." "I'm sure," Clint interrupted, his voice firm. He looked down at the puppy, who was watching him with those trust-filled eyes, and felt something shift inside him. The walls he'd built up over years of police work, the emotional distance he'd maintained to protect himself, began to crumble as the vet and her assistant began preparing for treatment. Clint stood there, his uniform still dripping, his hands clenched. At his sides, he couldn't shake the image of the puppy dragging itself across the wet pavement, couldn't forget the deliberate nature of its injuries. For the first time in years, he felt something beyond his professional duty. He felt anger, compassion, and a deep need to make things right. The puppy whimpered again as the vet began cleaning its wounds, and Clint found himself moving closer, offering what comfort he could with his presence. This wasn't just another case, another report to file. This was something personal, something that had somehow breached all his careful defenses and touched his heart. In that moment, as lightning continued to flash outside and rain drummed against the clinic's windows, Officer Clint Harwood made a silent promise to the small, injured creature on the examination table. He would find who did this. He would make sure justice was served. And most importantly, he would make sure this puppy never had to suffer like this again. The small veterinary clinic was quiet except for the steady beep of monitoring equipment and the occasional whimper from the injured puppy. Dr. Sarah Chun, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, carefully examined the trembling animal on the steel table while Clint stood nearby, his uniform still wet from the rain. "These injuries," Dr. Chun's voice trailed off as she gently probed the puppy's damaged leg. "This wasn't an accident, Officer Harwood. The breaks are too precise, too deliberate. Someone did this intentionally." Clint's jaw tightened. He'd seen his share of cruelty during his 15 years on the force, but this struck a different chord. The puppy's brown eyes met his, filled with a trust he didn't deserve. Any idea how long ago this happened? Within the last 24 hours, I'd say. And there's more. Dr. Chun pointed to several older scars barely visible beneath the dog's fur. This poor thing has suffered multiple injuries over time. Classic signs of organized dogfighting. The words hit Clint like a physical blow. Dogfighting. In Cedar Grove. He'd heard whispers, of course every cop had, but nothing concrete enough to act on. You've seen cases like this before. More than I'd like to admit. Dr. Chun's voice carried a weight of frustration. But getting evidence that holds up in court? That's another matter entirely. Back at the station, Clint couldn't shake the image of those trusting eyes. He sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard. A search for recent animal cruelty cases yielded little, but something tugged at his memory. Complaints that had been filed and mysteriously disappeared. Rumors that nobody wanted to investigate too closely. Let it go, Harwood. Officer Pete. Martinez dropped into the chair beside Clint's desk, coffee cup in hand. You're looking at that face like you're about to do something stupid. You ever wonder why we never get anywhere with the dogfighting complaints? Clint asked, keeping his voice low. Martinez glanced around the nearly empty office before leaning closer. Because smart cops know when to look the other way. You start poking around that hornet's nest, you're going to get stung. What about Raymond Driscoll? Clint watched his colleague's face carefully. His name keeps coming up in the old reports. Martinez's coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. Driscoll? The Junkyard King? Man, you really want to commit career suicide, don't you? He set the cup down with deliberate care. Listen, Clint, I like you, so I'm going to give you some friendly advice. Driscoll's got friends in high places. The kind of friends who can make life very uncomfortable for nosy cops. So we just ignore it? Clint gestured at his computer screen. Look at these patterns. Complaints near his properties, witnesses who suddenly won't talk, evidence that vanishes. And what exactly do you have? A hurt dog and some coincidences? Martinez shook his head. The captain's not going to authorize an investigation based on that. Neither will the DA. Drop it before you get yourself in trouble. But Clint couldn't drop it. That night, lying in his bed, sleep eluded him. The puppy's eyes haunted him, along with all the other animals he now suspected had suffered similar fates. His apartment felt too quiet, too empty, filled only with the soft ticking of his bedside clock and the weight of his thoughts. He'd built his career on being professional, detached, following the rules. It was safer that way, cleaner. No messy emotional attachments, no complicated moral dilemmas. Just the law, black and white, right and wrong. But this didn't feel right. The system he'd sworn to uphold was failing, protecting the powerful while the vulnerable suffered. Raymond Driscoll's face appeared in his mind, a man he'd seen only in newspaper photographs, always in expensive suits, always wearing that smug smile of untouchable wealth. Clint rolled over, punching his pillow in. Frustration. Martinez was right about one thing. Going after Driscoll would be career suicide. The man had connections throughout the city government, generous donations to all the right charities, and a reputation for crushing anyone who crossed him. At 3:17 in the morning, Clint finally sat up in bed, switching on his lamp. His service weapon lay in its lockbox on the nightstand, a symbol of the authority he'd always respected and upheld. But what good was that authority if he couldn't use it to protect the truly helpless? He walked to his desk and opened his laptop. If he was going to do this, he'd need to be smart about it. Careful, document everything. Build a case so solid that not even Driscoll's connections could bury it. It would mean working alone, trusting no one, risking everything he'd built. Puppy's eyes appeared in his mind again, and this time they seemed to be asking a simple question. If not you, then who? Clint began to type, creating a new folder on his personal drive. He labeled it D-Investigation, and started collecting every scrap of information he could find about Raymond Driscoll's empire. News articles, property records, complaint histories. Anything that might help him understand the man he was about to challenge. Dawn was breaking when Clint finally closed his laptop. He'd made his decision. Sometimes doing what was right meant breaking ranks, meant standing alone. Whatever the cost, he couldn't turn away from this. Couldn't pretend he hadn't seen what he'd seen. He got dressed for his shift, his movements. Deliberate and focused. Today wouldn't look any different from the outside. He'd patrol his route, file his reports, maintain his professional facade. But everything had changed. He was no longer just following orders or staying detached. He had chosen a new path, one that would lead him straight into conflict with one of the most dangerous men in Cedar Grove. As he pinned his badge to his uniform, Clint caught his reflection in the mirror. The same face looked back at him, but something in the eyes had changed. There was a determination there now, a purpose that went beyond mere duty. He was about to discover just how much one man's conscience was worth in a world where money and power made the rules. Clint pulled his unmarked car into the gravel lot of the Cedar Grove Animal Shelter. The modest brick building had seen better days, with peeling paint and a sign that desperately needed replacing. But the barking from inside suggested the place was full of life, if not resources. He found Nora Whitfield in the back, cleaning kennels. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her green eyes narrowed with suspicion when she saw his badge. "Officer Harwood," she said, straightening up and wiping her hands on her already stained jeans. "If this is about my complaint. Last month, I already know. Insufficient evidence, right?" "Actually, I'm here about Raymond Driscoll," Clint said quietly. The change in her expression was immediate. She glanced around, then gestured for him to follow her into a small office, cluttered with donation boxes and filing cabinets. "Close the door," she instructed, moving to shut the window blinds. "What about Driscoll?" Clint told her about the puppy, watching as her face darkened with each detail. When he finished, she sank into her desk chair, running a hand through her hair. "I've been trying to catch that monster for 2 years," she said. "Every time we get close to proof, it vanishes. Witnesses go silent, evidence disappears." She leaned forward. "But you believe it now, don't you? You've seen it yourself." "My department won't pursue it," Clint admitted. "They say there's not enough evidence." "Of course they won't." Nora's voice was bitter. "Driscoll donated the money for the new police station wing last year. Very generous of him, wasn't it?" She stood up suddenly, moving to a filing cabinet. After rifling through several folders, she pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Here," she said, spreading photos and documents across her desk. Late-night truck movements at his secondary properties. License plates that don't match registration records. Witnesses who talked to me before they got scared silent. She looked up at Clint. "I'm not just some bleeding heart making wild accusations. I've been documenting everything." Clint picked up one of the photos. A large truck leaving a warehouse. At 2:37 in the morning, according to the timestamp. "The fights happen at different locations each time," Nora explained. "They move the dogs around at night, thinking no one's watching. But I've been watching. She hesitated. "I just haven't had anyone believe me before. Anyone with authority." Their eyes met across the desk, and Clint saw the same determination he'd felt that morning looking back at him. Here was someone else who couldn't look away, couldn't pretend. Everything was fine. "I can't officially investigate," he said carefully. "But unofficially, we might be able to help each other," Nora finished. She pulled out a map, pointing to several marked locations. "These are the properties I've identified as possible fight venues. They rotate to avoid detection, but patterns emerge if you know what to look for." For the next hour, they compared notes. Nora's grassroots intelligence combined with Clint's law enforcement experience began painting a clearer picture. The operation was larger than either had suspected, with tentacles reaching into multiple counties. "Why didn't you come to the police before?" Clint asked. Nora's laugh was hollow. "I did. Multiple times, but I'm just the crazy animal lady, right? The one who makes too much noise about things people don't want to see." She looked at him curiously. "What changed for you?" "Most cops write me off as a nuisance." Clint thought about the puppy's eyes, about the moment his carefully maintained professional distance had cracked. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "you see something that makes you realize following the rules isn't the same as doing what's right. Welcome to my world," Nora said softly. She gathered up the documents, handing him copies. "We'll need to be careful. Driscoll has eyes everywhere. But together," she smiled for the first time since he'd arrived, "together, maybe we can finally stop him." As Clint left the shelter, he felt something he hadn't expected: hope. In Nora, he'd found not just an ally, but someone who understood. Someone who saw what he saw and refused to look away. Their partnership might be unlikely, the by-the-book cop and the passionate activist, but sometimes the strongest bonds form in the spaces between what we're supposed to be and what we know is right. The midnight streets glistened with fresh rain as Clint patrolled the industrial district. His mind kept wandering back to the evidence he and Nora had gathered over the past week. Photographs of suspicious late-night deliveries at Driscoll's junkyard, statements from nervous witnesses who'd seen bloodied dogs being transported in unmarked vans. Each piece pointed to an underground dogfighting ring, but they still needed concrete proof. A flash of movement caught his eye, a black SUV running a red light. Clint hit his sirens and accelerated after it. As the pursuit began, something felt off about how his patrol car was handling. When he pressed the brake pedal approaching a sharp turn, his stomach dropped. There was no resistance, no slowing down. No. Clint pumped the brakes frantically, but the car kept speeding forward. His training kicked in as he downshifted rapidly, using the engine to brake while scanning for an escape route. The concrete barrier of an overpass loomed ahead. At the last possible moment, Clint yanked the emergency brake and wrenched the wheel hard. The patrol car spun violently, tires screaming against wet pavement. Metal scraped concrete as the passenger side clipped the barrier before the car finally shuddered to a stop. Clint sat frozen, knuckles white on the steering wheel, heart thundering in his chest. The acrid smell of burnt rubber filled his lungs. When his hands finally stopped shaking enough to use his radio, he called it in. "Unit 17, 1050 near Miller Street overpass. Brake failure. Request mechanical inspection and supervisor." Later that night, the department mechanic confirmed what Clint already suspected. Someone had carefully cut his brake lines. This wasn't an accident. This was attempted murder. Still rattled, Clint drove his personal vehicle to the veterinary clinic, where they were keeping the disabled puppy he'd rescued. The small brown dog's tail thumped weakly against the blanket when Clint approached the kennel. "Hey there, little fighter," Clint whispered, carefully lifting the puppy onto his lap. The animal's back legs were permanently damaged, but his spirit remained unbroken. "Someone tried to take me out tonight. Just like they tried to take you out." He gently scratched behind the puppy's ears. "But we're both still here, aren't we? Still fighting." The next morning, Clint met Nora at a small diner far from their usual haunts. Dark circles rimmed her eyes as she listened to his account of the brake failure. "This proves it," she said, voice tight with anger. "Driscoll knows we're onto him. He's getting desperate." "He's getting dangerous," Clint corrected. "This isn't just about stopping illegal dogfights anymore. He's willing to kill to keep his operation running." "Are you going to back off?" Nora searched his face. "No one would blame you after what happened." Clint thought about the puppy at the vet, refusing to give up despite its injuries. "No," he said firmly. "What started as doing the right thing has become personal now. Driscoll needs to be stopped before anyone else gets hurt, human or animal. Then we need to be smarter about this, Nora replied. More careful, no more late-night surveillance alone. We document everything. Build an airtight case. Clint nodded, determination hardening his features. The attack proves we're getting close to something big. Driscoll wouldn't have tried to kill me over a few dogfights. There has to be more going on at that junkyard. Whatever it is, Nora said, we'll find it, together. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Just promise me you'll be careful. That puppy isn't the only one counting on you now. Looking into her concerned eyes, Clint felt something shift inside him. What had started as a simple act of compassion for an injured animal had evolved into something far more complex, a mission. That could cost him his life, but one he couldn't walk away from. The disabled puppy had cracked open his protective shell, and now there was no going back to being the detached officer who looked the other way. I promise, he told Nora, but Driscoll just made this personal. And I'm not stopping until we bring him down. Clint sat in his patrol car, staring at the manila envelope on the passenger seat. His hands trembled as he reached for it again, though he'd already memorized its devastating contents. Photos, bank statements, and handwritten notes, all pointing to an ugly truth he could unsee. Captain Roberts, his direct superior and mentor of 8 years, had been taking monthly payments from Raymond Driscoll. The evidence was clear as day. $5,000 deposited like clockwork into an offshore account, coinciding perfectly with convenient oversights in investigations of Driscoll's property. This can't be happening, Clint muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. The streetlight cast harsh shadows across the documentation spread before him. Each piece of paper felt like a knife in his back. He thought back to all the times Captain Roberts had told him to let it go, or focus on real crime. Now those dismissive words carried a different weight. The captain hadn't just been protecting Driscoll. He'd been profiting from the suffering of innocent animals. His phone buzzed. It was Nora. Did you look at what I sent? Her voice was gentle but urgent. Yeah, Clint's throat felt tight. I looked. I'm so sorry, Clint. I know Captain Roberts meant a lot to you. The sympathy in her voice nearly broke him. 8 years, Nora. 8 years I looked up to him, trusted him. Clint slammed his hand against the steering wheel. How many animals suffered because he chose money over doing what's right? This isn't your fault, Nora said firmly. But now we know why nothing's ever stuck to Driscoll. The system's rigged from the inside. Clint watched a group of fellow officers exit the station, laughing and heading toward their cars. How many of them knew? How many were involved? The brotherhood he'd been so proud to join suddenly felt like a stranger's house. Maybe, his voice cracked, maybe I should just turn in my badge. What's the point of wearing it if? Don't you dare, Nora cut him off. That badge means something. Because of people like you, not despite them. The system needs good cops more than ever. Clint closed his eyes, remembering the disabled puppy he'd rescued that rainy night. Despite all odds, the little fighter was slowly recovering at the vet's office. What am I supposed to do? I can't trust anyone at the department now. Then, trust yourself, Nora replied. Trust what you know is right. Justice isn't about following orders. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. The truth of her words settled deep in his chest. The path ahead would be lonely, but he couldn't walk away. Not now, not when he knew the truth. We'll need to be more careful, Clint said, straightening in his seat. Roberts isn't just protecting Driscoll anymore. He's protecting himself. That makes him even more dangerous. I know, Nora agreed. But we're not alone. There are other good people in this fight. We just have to find them. Clint gathered the evidence back into the envelope, his resolve hardening. The attempted murder. With his break line suddenly made more sense. It wasn't just Driscoll's thugs he had to watch for, but potentially corrupt officers as well. "This goes beyond animal cruelty now," he said. "It's about everything the badge is supposed to stand for." "That's why you can't give up," Nora insisted. "Sometimes standing alone for what's right is more important than standing together for what's wrong." Looking at his reflection in the rearview mirror, Clint saw something new in his own eyes, not just determination, but a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to serve and protect. The uniform he wore felt heavier now, but also more meaningful. "Thank you, Nora," he said quietly, "for believing in me when no one else did." "Just promise me you'll be careful," she replied. "We're dealing with desperate people now." "I promise." Clint started his car, mind already planning his next moves. "But I won't stop until Driscoll and everyone protecting him faces justice." As he drove away from the station, Clint realized that while his trust in the department was shattered, his commitment to justice had never been stronger. The road ahead would be dangerous and lonely, but he knew now more than ever that he was fighting for something bigger than himself. Clint sat in his patrol car, his hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The revelation about Captain Morris taking bribes from Driscoll had shaken him to his core. But he refused to let corruption win. His phone buzzed. It was Nora. "I might have found us some help," she said, her voice carrying a hint of hope. "Meet me at Bailey's coffee shop in 20 minutes. When Clint walked into the small cafe, he spotted Nora sitting with two men. The first was Officer Jake Martinez, a rookie whose eager eyes still held the idealism that many veterans had lost. The second was an older gentleman with weathered features and calloused hands. "This is Frank Reeves," Nora introduced. "He used to be the department's top K9 handler until Driscoll destroyed my career," Frank finished, his voice rough with old pain. 10 years ago, I caught wind of his dogfighting ring. Started asking questions. Next thing I knew, drugs were found in my locker. Lost my badge, my pension, everything. Clint leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. "And you, Martinez? Why risk your career?" The young officer straightened his shoulders. "Sir, I've watched how you handle cases, always doing what's right, not what's easy. When I heard whispers about you investigating Driscoll, I knew I wanted to help." They spent the next hour planning. Frank had maintained contacts in the neighborhood and learned that Driscoll was keeping dogs in an old warehouse on Pine Street. "They move them every few weeks," he explained, spreading out a crude map on the table. "But we've got a window tomorrow night. Guard rotations lightest then." Nora pulled out her phone, showing photos of the warehouse. "I've been watching the place. 2 guards usually, sometimes 3. They bring in supplies every Tuesday, dog food, chains, fighting equipment." The plan came together quickly. Martinez would create a diversion by responding to a false complaint 2 blocks away. Frank knew the warehouse's layout and would guide them to where the dogs were kept. Nora had a network of rescue volunteers ready with vehicles to transport any animals they found. The next night, Clint parked his unmarked car in a shadowy alley near the warehouse. His heart pounded as he checked his gear one last time. Frank's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Guards just changed shifts. We're good to go." They moved silently through the darkness. Frank's experience showed. He led them to a rusted door that wasn't visible from the street. Inside, the smell hit them first: fear, waste, and blood. Clint's flashlight beam revealed rows of cages. Dogs whimpered and cowered, many bearing fresh wounds. "Dear God," Nora whispered, her voice breaking. They worked quickly, documenting everything with photos and video. Clint found ledgers detailing fights, bets, and payoffs, including regular payments to Captain Morris. But as they started opening cages, everything went wrong. Shouts erupted outside. The sharp scent of gasoline filled the air, followed by the unmistakable whoosh of flames catching. "They're burning the evidence!" Frank yelled. Smoke began pouring. The dog started barking in panic. Clint and the others worked frantically, breaking locks and guiding terrified animals toward the exit. The heat became intense, flames licking up the walls. "The roof's going to go," Frank warned. Clint could barely see through the thickening smoke. He heard Nora coughing violently somewhere to his left. A support beam crashed down, missing Clint. By inches, the ledgers, he couldn't leave without them. He lunged through the smoke, grabbing the documents. Pain seared across his back as embers rained down. They stumbled out into the night air, guiding the last of the dogs. Nora's rescue team was already loading animals into vans. In the distance, sirens wailed. Clint collapsed against a wall, his lungs burning. His jacket was singed, skin blistered underneath. But in his hands, he clutched the proof they needed, detailed records of Driscoll's operation, and the corruption protecting it. Frank helped him to his feet. "You okay, son?" Clint nodded, still coughing. "We got them. We finally got them." Nora appeared through the smoke, her face streaked with soot but eyes bright. 43 dogs rescued, she reported, all being taken to safe locations. They watched as the warehouse burned, its flames reflecting in the frightened eyes of the rescued dogs. Clint's back throbbed, but a different kind of fire burned inside him now, the certainty that they had struck the first real blow against Driscoll's empire of cruelty. The evidence from the warehouse raid spread like wildfire through the local media. Photos of injured dogs, chains, and fighting equipment filled the morning papers. Citizens gathered outside the police station, holding signs demanding justice. Their angry voices echoed through the streets, calling for Raymond Driscoll's arrest. "Look at this," Nora said, spreading newspaper clippings across Clint's kitchen table. "People are finally seeing the truth. They're on our side." But their victory was short-lived. Within days, Driscoll's expensive legal team descended on the city like vultures. They questioned the legality of the raid, citing lack of proper warrants and procedures. His lawyers spoke eloquently on television, weaving a different narrative. Officer Harwood's actions were not only reckless but dangerous, Driscoll's head attorney announced at a press conference. He endangered lives with his vigilante behavior, acting without authorization and proper backup. "This obsession with my client has clouded his judgment." The smear campaign hit hard and fast. Stories began circulating about Clint's past cases, twisted to paint him as unstable. Anonymous sources questioned his mental state, suggesting the stress of police work had pushed him over the edge. Captain Morris called Clint into his office on a gray Tuesday morning. The captain's face was stern, his voice cold. "Turn in your badge and gun, Harwood. You're suspended pending investigation." Clint's world spun as he placed his badge on the desk. 15 years of service reduced to this moment. In the locker room, officers who once called him friend turned away, avoiding his eyes. That evening, Clint sat alone in the veterinary clinic, watching the rescued puppy, now named Hope, struggle through physical therapy. Her determined spirit remained unbroken despite her injuries, but progress was painfully slow. The sight of her tiny legs trembling with effort broke something inside him. "She's not giving up," Dr. Martinez said softly, adjusting Hope's support harness, "and neither should you." But the weight of failure pressed down on him. His phone buzzed constantly with reporters seeking comments. Local TV stations ran segments questioning his credibility. Former colleagues gave interviews, shaking their heads sadly about his decline. Nora found him sitting in his darkened living room that night, surrounded by newspaper clippings and case files. "They're winning," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Everything we fought for, everything we risked our lives for, they're burying it all." She sat beside him, her presence steady and unwavering. "No, they're not," she said firmly. "The truth doesn't disappear just because they try to cover it up. Those dogs we saved, they're alive because of you. Hope is fighting to walk again because you stopped that night in the rain." Tears burned in Clint's eyes. "I lost everything, Nora. My badge, my reputation, the trust of my fellow officers. You haven't lost your integrity, she countered, gripping his hand. And you haven't lost me. We're not done fighting, Clint. Not while Driscoll is still out there, not while there are more animals suffering. Her words reached through his despair, offering a lifeline. The suspension felt like a noose around his neck, but Nora's faith in him remained unshaken. She stayed with him through the long night, helping him organize evidence, making plans, refusing to let him sink into darkness. Dawn found them still working, empty coffee cups scattered around them. Clint felt hollow, exhausted, but something inside him had solidified. His career might be in shambles, his name dragged through the mud, but he wouldn't, abandon the fight. Not while Hope kept struggling to stand on her damaged legs, not while Driscoll's cruelty continued behind closed doors. He might have lost his badge, but he hadn't lost his purpose. And with Nora beside him, her determination matching his own, he found the strength to face another day in this uphill battle for justice. Clint sat in his dimly lit kitchen, staring at the suspension papers scattered across the table. His police badge lay cold and lifeless beside them, a painful reminder of everything he'd lost. Outside, rain pelted against the windows, matching his dark mood. We can't let them win, Nora said firmly, pacing the kitchen floor. Her usually neat appearance was disheveled, evidence of sleepless nights spent planning. There has to be a way to expose Driscoll. Clint ran his fingers through his graying hair. The department's turned against me. The media's painting me as some kind of vigilante. He paused, his voice growing quiet. Maybe they're right. A weak bark drew their attention. In the corner, lying on a plush bed, the rescued puppy Chance lifted his head. Despite his permanent limp, his eyes shone with unwavering trust. The sight of him stirred something deep in Clint's chest. Look at him, Nora said softly. He hasn't given up. Neither should we. Clint stood up and walked to the window, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. Driscoll's getting sloppy. His fight nights are getting bigger, more frequent. He thinks he's untouchable now. Nora's eyes widened. That's it. The fight nights. If we could get solid evidence, it would have to be ironclad, Clint said, turning back to face her. Video footage, dates, faces, everything. They spent the next hours hunched over Clint's kitchen table, plotting every detail. Through their underground network, they learned of an upcoming fight night, scheduled for Saturday at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. We'll need disguises, Nora said, scribbling notes. These people know who you are now. Clint nodded grimly, and equipment. Hidden cameras, audio recorders, nothing can be left to chance. They reached out to their small circle of allies. The rookie officer, Jimmy Chun, risked his career to provide them with surveillance equipment. The retired canine handler, Mike Sullivan, drew detailed maps of the warehouse district from memory. As the days counted down, Clint felt the weight of their mission growing heavier. Each morning, he'd watch Chance struggle to walk with his injured leg, determination evident in every step. The puppy's resilience became his anchor, a reminder of why this fight mattered. If we fail, he told Nora during their final planning session, it's not just us who'll pay the price. Everyone who's helped us will go down too. Nora met his gaze steadily. And if we do nothing, Driscoll wins. More animals suffer. More people get hurt. Is that something you can live with? The answer was written in the scars on Chance's small body, in the haunted eyes of every rescued dog, in the weight of his suspended badge. No, he couldn't live with that. They spent hours memorizing their covers. Nora would pose as a wealthy fight enthusiast from out of town. Clint, with his beard grown out and hair dyed darker, would play her security consultant. The hidden cameras were carefully concealed in their clothing, tested repeatedly until the operation became second nature. The night before the operation, Clint sat alone with Chance, gently stroking the puppy's head. You know something, boy? You saved me that night as much as I saved you." Chance's tail wagged weakly, and he pressed closer to Clint's hand. "Tomorrow, we make it count. We make it right." Morning arrived with a cold clarity. Clint checked his disguise one final time in the mirror. The stranger staring back at him looked nothing like Officer Harwood. Good. That man needed to disappear for tonight. Nora arrived dressed in expensive clothes, her usual warmth hidden behind a mask of calculated indifference. They ran through their final equipment checks in silence, each lost in their own thoughts about what waited ahead. "Whatever happens tonight," Clint said as they prepared to leave, "thank you for believing in me when no one else did." Nora squeezed his arm. "We're going to finish this for Chance. For all of them." They left the house under the cover of early evening, their hearts pounding with equal measures of fear and determination. In his bed, Chance watched them go, his soft whimper a prayer for their safe return. This was their last shot at justice, their final gamble against corruption. And failure wasn't an option, not anymore. The warehouse loomed before them, its corrugated metal walls vibrating with the distant roar of the crowd inside. Clint adjusted his hidden camera, his heart thundering against his ribs. Nora gave him a subtle nod as they approached the entrance, where two burly men checked credentials. "Miss Catherine Brooks," Nora said coolly, producing the forged invitation. "And my security consultant." The guards waved them through. The stench hit them first. Sweat, blood, and fear mingled in the stale air. They followed the noise down a dimly lit corridor that opened into a cavernous space. Wooden bleachers formed a circle around a central pit, packed with shouting spectators waving cash. Clint's jaw clenched at the sight of scared dogs being held in cages along the walls. He forced himself to maintain his cover, scanning the crowd while secretly recording everything. Nora circulated smoothly, playing her role as she gathered intelligence. Then Clint saw him, Raymond Driscoll, holding court in a raised platform above the pit. The man's expensive suit couldn't hide his true nature. His eyes were cold, predatory, watching the suffering below with detached amusement. Everything was going according to plan, until one of Driscoll's lieutenants did a double take, studying Clint's face too intently. "Boss," he shouted, "it's Harwood." The crowd went silent. Driscoll's smile turned savage. Well. The disgraced officer couldn't stay away. He snapped his fingers, and men began closing in. "Kill him," chaos erupted. Clint threw the first punch as a thug rushed him, sending the man sprawling. But there were too many. Fists and boots found their mark, driving him toward the pit. He fought desperately, but each blow weakened him further. A kick to his ribs sent him tumbling into the fighting pit. Blood ran into his eyes as he struggled to stand. Driscoll's men jumped down after him, circling like wolves. "You should have stayed suspended, Harwood," Driscoll called down. "Now you'll die like the dogs you love so much." The first attacker rushed in. Clint managed to deflect the punch and counter, but another man caught him from behind. A knee drove into his kidney. An elbow cracked against his jaw. He hit the ground hard, vision blurring. Through the haze of pain, he saw Nora had disappeared. Maybe she'd escaped. Good. At least the evidence would survive. Even if he didn't. Then a familiar sound cut through the chaos, a sharp, determined bark. There, at the edge of the pit, stood Nora, and in her arms was Chance, the rescued puppy, barking furiously at Driscoll. The sight of the disabled dog he'd tried to destroy seemed to unhinge Driscoll. That mutt should be dead. He roared, his careful facade cracking completely. In that moment of distraction, Clint found his second wind. He surged upward, catching the nearest thug with an uppercut that dropped him cold. Another rushed in, but Clint was moving on pure adrenaline now. He ducked under a wild swing and drove his fist into the man's solar plexus. Driscoll, enraged, vaulted into the pit himself. "I'll finish this myself." He pulled brass knuckles from his pocket, the metal Gleaming dully, Clint wiped blood from his face, stand steady despite his injuries. "Come on then," he growled. "Show everyone who you really are." Driscoll charged with surprising speed for his size. The brass knuckles whistled past Clint's head as he barely dodged. The next blow caught him in the shoulder, sending needles of pain down his arm. But Chance kept barking, the sound driving Driscoll to greater fury. His attacks became wild, uncontrolled. Clint weathered the storm, waiting for his opening. It came when Driscoll overextended on a punch. Clint stepped inside his guard and unleashed everything he had left, a devastating combination that started with a liver shot and ended with an uppercut that lifted Driscoll off his feet. The crime boss crashed to the ground, brass knuckles clattering. Away. Before he could rise, Clint was on him, securing him in an arrest hold even as sirens began wailing in the distance. "Raymond Driscoll," Clint gasped out, making sure his hidden camera caught everything. "You're under arrest for animal cruelty, operating illegal dogfights, attempted murder of a police officer, and corruption." Nora's voice rang out across the stunned warehouse. "Everyone here has been recorded. The exits are covered. It's over." Blue lights flashed through the high windows as police vehicles surrounded the building. Heavy boots thundered down the corridors. As tactical teams breached the entrance, Clint held Driscoll down, his body screaming in pain but his spirit soaring. In Nora's arms, Chance's tail wagged firmly, his brave bark now a victory cry. In the days following Driscoll's arrest, justice moved with surprising speed. The evidence from Clint's hidden camera proved irrefutable, not just of the dogfighting operation, but of the web of corruption protecting it. Detective Sergeant Phillips, Clint's superior, was caught on tape accepting bribes, his gruff voice unmistakable as he promised Driscoll police protection. The internal affairs investigation rocked the department. Phillips was let out in handcuffs, his badge stripped away as other officers watched in stunned silence. For Clint, watching from his desk after being officially reinstated, it felt surreal. The same colleagues who had doubted him now approached with sheepish congratulations and apologetic handshakes. "Officer Harwood," the chief said during the formal reinstatement ceremony, "your unwavering commitment to justice despite personal risk and professional consequences exemplifies the highest standards of this department." The Commendation Medal gleamed against Clint's freshly pressed uniform, but his proudest moment came after the ceremony. Nora waited for him outside, holding Chance, the puppy whose rescue had started everything. The small dog's leg would always bear the scars of his past, but his eyes sparkled with life and trust. The veterinarian had declared him fully recovered, ready for adoption. "I think someone's been waiting for his forever home," Nora said, smiling as Chance wiggled excitedly in her arms. The puppy had spent weeks recovering at her shelter, forming a special bond with both of them during their visits between case developments. Clint took Chance into his arms, feeling the warm weight of the dog against his chest. "What do you say, buddy? Want to make it official?" Chance responded with enthusiastic licks to his face, making both Clint and Nora laugh. The adoption papers were already prepared. Clint signed them right there, on the hood of his patrol car, while Chance watched with apparent approval. "I thought about names for weeks," Clint admitted, scratching behind the puppy's ears. "But really, there's only one that fits. Chance. Because that's what he gave me. A chance to be better, to do better." "It's perfect," Nora agreed, her hand finding his. The touch was natural, comfortable, like everything about their relationship had become. What started as an unlikely alliance had grown into something deeper, built on shared principles and tested by fire. At Driscoll's sentencing hearing, they sat together in the courtroom, Chance curled quietly at their feet. The judge's voice rang with conviction as she handed down the maximum sentence: 15 years for animal cruelty, racketeering, and attempted murder. Driscoll's face turned purple with rage, but his power was gone. His empire of cruelty had crumbled, His money couldn't buy his freedom, and his threats fell on deaf ears. That evening, Clint and Nora walked through the park where he'd first found Chance. The setting sun painted the sky in warm colors, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. Chance trotted ahead of them, his limp now barely noticeable, stopping occasionally to investigate interesting smells. "I never thought I'd be here," Clint admitted, watching his dog with pride. "Before Chance, I was just going through the motions, doing my job, following orders, keeping my head down." Nora squeezed his hand. "And now? Now I understand what really matters, standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his, and finding people worth standing beside. Their first kiss was gentle, natural, like the final piece of a puzzle falling into place. Chance barked happily, circling their legs, as if giving his approval to this new development. Later that night, in Clint's apartment, Chance settled into his new bed, though they both knew he'd end up on the couch with Clint, as usual. The walls, once bare, now held photos of their journey, Chance's recovery milestones, candid shots of Nora at the shelter, the team that had helped bring down Driscoll. "We make quite a team, don't we?" Clint said, watching Chance already abandoning his bed to claim his spot on the couch. "The three of us? We're unbeatable," Nora replied, curling up beside him. Clint looked at his badge on the coffee table, catching the evening light. It meant something different now, not just authority, but responsibility, compassion, the courage to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. Chance rested his head on Clint's lap, sighing contentedly. The scars of their shared journey would always remain, but they had emerged stronger, transformed by the simple truth that sometimes the greatest acts of justice begin with a single moment of compassion. As night fell over the city, Officer Clint Harwood sat with his small, unconventional family, a rescued puppy who had rescued him right back, and a woman whose belief in justice matched his own. He was no longer the distant cop who kept the world at arm's length. He had chosen a different path, one marked by courage over compromise, love over indifference, and the unwavering conviction that doing what's right was always worth the fight. If something today spoke to the part of you that still believes in love, stay a while. Subscribe. I'll be here again tomorrow with another story worth feeling.